The object breached Jupiter's upper atmosphere at 14:37 Universal Time Coordinated on March 8, 2023, and I need you to understand that what I'm about to tell you has already cost 6 people their lives and condemned 4 others to something worse. My name is Dr. Marcus Vrell, former senior astrophysicist at a high-altitude Pacific observatory, and I'm recording this because the silence protocols they've imposed are killing us faster than the truth ever could. The thing that emerged from Jupiter's southern hemisphere in 2023 measured exactly 12.7 kilometers in length, and it's still out there, and it's still moving toward us. We first detected the anomaly 3 hours before emergence as a massive displacement signature in Jupiter's magnetosphere, reading orders of magnitude beyond any theoretical limits our models could accommodate. Dr. Sarah Reeves was on the spectroscopy array when the first readings came through. She called me over, and I remember her hands were shaking as she pointed to the screen. "Marcus, something's rising," she said, and her voice had this strange hollow quality, like she already knew we were looking at something that would unmake us. The spectrographic data showed material composition that couldn't exist. Metallic hydrogen in a solid state at temperatures exceeding 4000 Kelvin, crystalline structures with tetrahedral geometries that violated basic thermodynamic principles, and an energy signature that pulsed at exactly 0.0768 Hz, a frequency that would later prove significant in ways I still don't fully understand. When it broke through the cloud tops, every telescope in our network locked onto it automatically. The visual confirmation came through at 14:41 Universal Time Coordinated, and what we saw defied every model, every theory, every assumption we'd built our careers upon. The object was cylindrical, but its surface seemed to refract light in impossible ways, creating visual echoes that appeared seconds before the object itself moved. Dr. James Morrison, our optical systems specialist, spent 17 minutes trying to calibrate the instruments before he realized the distortion wasn't mechanical. "It's bending spacetime around itself," he whispered, and then he started laughing, this high desperate sound that made my skin crawl. They sedated him 6 hours later when he began insisting he could see through the walls, that the geometry of the observation room was changing, expanding into dimensions that human architecture shouldn't possess. The trajectory calculations came back wrong every single time. The object was accelerating at rates that defied our understanding, and the propulsion method registered as nothing. No exhaust plume, no radiation signature beyond the baseline distortion, no reaction mass being expelled. It was simply moving, pulling itself through space with a method our physics couldn't describe. Dr. Reeves ran the numbers dozens of times, and each iteration gave her a different result, as if the object existed in multiple temporal states simultaneously. What emerged from Jupiter that day in March wasn't following the rules we'd spent our lives studying. It was rewriting them. Then people started hearing it. Not through the equipment, you understand, but inside themselves. Dr. Lisa Kowalski was the first to report the sensation at 22:15 Universal Time Coordinated on March 9. She described it as a low vibration that seemed to originate from her bones, specifically her sternum and the base of her skull. The frequency matched the object's energy signature, 0.0768 Hz, far below normal human hearing range, but somehow we could feel it resonating in our skeletal structure. Within 18 hours, all 43 personnel at the facility were experiencing the same phenomenon. We tried everything to block it: lead-lined rooms, electromagnetic shielding, noise-canceling systems calibrated to that exact frequency, but nothing helped because the sound wasn't traveling through air or matter. It was propagating through something else, some medium we couldn't detect or measure, and it was getting stronger with each passing day. The psychological effects manifested in stages. First came the dreams, uniform across all personnel. We would find ourselves standing in corridors that extended infinitely in all directions, walls made of a material that looked like polished obsidian but felt warm and organic when touched. The corridors would shift and reconfigure as we moved through them, doors opening into rooms that contained other versions of ourselves, all of us staring back with expressions of growing horror. Dr. Reeves woke up screaming on March 12 because in her dream she had walked through one of those doors and met herself on the other side, except the other version was translucent, and she could see stars moving inside her chest cavity where her heart should be. By March 15th, 3 members of our team had suffered complete psychotic breaks. Dr. Morrison was found in the maintenance tunnels, having used a screwdriver to carve intricate geometric patterns into the concrete walls. The patterns were non-Euclidean, angles that shouldn't exist in three-dimensional space, and when we photographed them for the incident report, the images came out distorted, as if the camera couldn't properly process what it was recording. Security Officer Thomas Bradford was discovered in the main observation deck, standing perfectly still for 6 hours, staring at a blank section of wall. When they finally moved him, there were burn marks on the floor where his feet had been standing, and his body temperature had dropped to 31 degrees Celsius. He hasn't spoken since, but sometimes he'll trace patterns in the air with his fingers, the same impossible geometries Morrison carved into the walls. 2 technicians disappeared entirely that week, walked into restricted sections and were never recovered. Their access badges were found melted into the door frames. The object changed course on March 18th. Every predictive model we built suddenly became accurate, converging on a single trajectory toward Earth's orbital path. The course correction happened instantaneously, no gradual adjustment, no visible propulsion activity, just a sudden shift that should have torn the object apart from the shear forces involved. Instead, it continued moving with perfect stability, as if inertia was a suggestion rather than a law. Our models couldn't agree on when it would arrive, ranging from months to years to never, each calculation contradicting the last. What we saw emerge from Jupiter that day was adjusting its path with impossible precision, preparing for something we couldn't yet comprehend, and time itself seemed uncertain around it. They shut us down on March 21st. Men in unmarked vehicles, no identification, carrying documentation that gave them authority over every aspect of the facility. They confiscated all our data, destroyed the backup systems, and implemented what they called information containment protocols. Dr. Reeves tried to resist, tried to argue that the scientific community had a right to know what came out of Jupiter, and they escorted her to a separate building. She came back 3 hours later and she wouldn't look at any of us. Her eyes had changed somehow, not the color but the way they moved, tracking things in the air that the rest of us couldn't see. She handed me a piece of paper with a single sentence written in her handwriting. They showed me what's inside it. Then she walked to her quarters and was found dead the next morning. I discovered her body at dawn. The note was still clutched in her hand, but there was additional text on the other side, written in what looked like her handwriting but couldn't have been because she was already gone when it appeared. The text said, "The geometry is expanding. Count the shadows." I checked my own shadow that afternoon, standing in the harsh sunlight that should have cast a single clear silhouette, and I counted 4. 4 distinct shadows, all moving slightly differently, all attached to my feet but diverging at different angles that changed depending on which direction I faced. They've been relocating us systematically since then, splitting up the team, assigning us to different facilities under different departments, ensuring we never communicate with each other again. But the vibration follows us. That 0.0768 Hz resonance that started in our bones has spread to our teeth, our organs, the fluid in our inner ears. Sometimes I'll be sitting in a meeting, discussing mundane administrative matters, and I'll feel my heartbeat synchronizing with that frequency, my pulse adjusting itself to match the rhythm of something that emerged from Jupiter and continues its approach. 4 of our original team never returned the same from their reassignments. They came back changed, speaking in patterns, counting things that aren't there, their shadows multiplying like mine. The frequency has shifted. The vibration I feel in my bones has changed, a subtle alteration that corresponds with the object's trajectory. My body is adjusting to match it. Autonomic systems I can't consciously control are synchronizing themselves with something that traveled through Jupiter's crushing atmosphere and emerged unscathed. I don't sleep anymore, not conventionally. Instead, I close my eyes and find myself in those infinite corridors, and now the doors are opening without me touching them, and the versions of myself on the other side are becoming more solid while I feel increasingly translucent. I'm recording this testimony in violation of multiple classified international statutes and multinational security frameworks that I wasn't previously aware existed. The people who shut us down, who sanitized our research about what emerged from Jupiter, who are currently monitoring this recording through methods I can only guess at, they know something we don't. They showed Dr. Reeves what was inside the object, and that knowledge was sufficient to convince her that death was preferable to living with that information. I don't know what she saw. I don't know what they're preparing for. But I know that every person who witnessed what came out of Jupiter that March, every person who has felt that vibration in their bones, is changing in ways that medical science can't quantify. Last week, I received an email from Dr. Morrison's account, even though Morrison has been catatonic in a secure medical facility for months. The email contained no text, just a single attached image. It was a photograph of the observation deck, taken from an angle that couldn't physically exist because the camera would have to be positioned inside solid rock to capture that perspective. In the center of the image, barely visible, was a figure standing exactly where Morrison had stood during his 6-hour trance. The figure was translucent, and I could see stars moving inside its chest cavity. When I looked at the timestamp on the email, it was dated 3 days in the future. My shadows now number 7. I checked this morning, standing in the sterile lighting of this anonymous facility where they've temporarily housed me, and I counted 7 distinct silhouettes, each one moving with slightly different timing, each one connected to my feet but extending in directions that geometry shouldn't permit. Sometimes, when I'm alone, I can feel them moving independently, sense them reaching toward something I can't see, something that exists in the spaces between the walls, in the angles that Morrison carved into concrete, in the corridors from our shared dreams. This is the last testimony I'll be able to record. They're moving me again tomorrow, to a location they won't disclose, under protocols that suggest permanence rather than temporary reassignment. But it doesn't matter where they take me. The object knows where I am. It's always known. From the moment we first detected that magnetospheric displacement, from the instant our instruments locked onto its impossible trajectory as it rose from Jupiter's depths, we became part of something larger than ourselves, participants in a process that began long before humanity existed and will continue long after we've been transformed. Count your shadows. If you've listened this far, if you've absorbed this information about what emerged from Jupiter, you're already connected to the frequency. Check your reflection in quiet moments, in harsh lighting that should produce simple silhouettes. Count carefully. The thing that came from Jupiter in March 2023 changed the rules of reality itself, and we were just the first to notice. Dr. Reeves understood that before any of us. She saw what waited inside that cylinder, and she chose oblivion over transformation. I don't have that choice anymore. None of us do. The corridors are infinite, the doors are opening, and something that spent billions of years in Jupiter's crushing depths is finally reaching out to claim what it came for. My 7 shadows are moving now, pulling away from my feet, reaching toward the walls. I can feel them calling to something inside me, something that recognizes them, something that wants to follow them into geometries my human mind was never meant to perceive. The geometry is expanding, and I'm running out of dimensions to hide in.